Hi, I'm Marlena Pavich. I'm 36 years old. I'm a set decorator and filmmaker living in Los Angeles. And though I haven't been formally diagnosed, I believe I have ADHD.
My name is Aaron Smith. I'm 39 years old. I'm an ADHD coach and licensed clinical therapist at Potential Within Reach. I was diagnosed at the age of 7 years old.
My name is Tonti, and I'm 32 years old. I'm also a professional filmmaker, and I received my ADHD diagnosis at 8 years old. Welcome to Attention Different, a movement that encourages the radical acceptance of our neurodiversity. We are a group of ADHDers motivated to share our unique lived-in experiences navigating adulthood. Our wins, our losses, ups and downs, relationships, careers, taxes, bills, work, school. We invite you to come take a dive with us as we explore not just what the condition presents on the surface, but what challenges and strengths lie beneath. Welcome to the Attention Different movement. This is Adulting with ADHD.
So just a quick disclaimer. For the record, I'm friends with the folks on this show, and I'm not acting in an official capacity as their therapist nor their ADHD coach. However, I'll be supporting both Stephen and Marlena through their journeys of adulting. For our audience, anything we say in this episode should not be construed as medical advice, so please check with your qualified mental health professional, therapist, or prescriber prior to implementing anything you hear.
Just obligatory start to this. Okay. Hi, hello, you made it. My name is Steven. I'm here with Aaron and Marlena, and this is Attention Different, our first series, Adulting with ADHD. Maybe you're here because you just recently were diagnosed with ADHD. Maybe you know someone who is diagnosed with ADHD, or maybe you're looking to get diagnosed or just to find out more about this condition and what it all means. You came to the right place, and we're so excited that you're here. We are here with Marlena Pavich, who is well into her 30s and has not formally been diagnosed as an adult with ADHD, but we're all pretty sure she is ADHD. So we're here to talk about why. Why hasn't she been diagnosed? What was the journey to get here? So without further ado, hey Marley, what brings you here to Attention Different? Give us a little bit of your ADHD journey up to this point, pre-diagnosis.
Most of my life, I felt like I was behind. I think there were a lot of little nuanced behaviors that kind of became like, that's just Marlena. I just felt very scatterbrained. I felt like I was always trying to catch up. And it chased me through school and college, though I was a really good student. It's gotten to a place where I'm realizing this struggle in executive functioning isn't just because I'm flaky and lofty and a daydreamer. It's actually a real condition.
When did you first feel that there was something different about your brain? And I mean, like, when were you convinced?
I fell into a depression, like a really dark depression, and I was self-medicating by smoking copious amounts of weed just to slow myself down. I think initially I thought that I was suffering just with some kind of emotional dysregulation and sadness. When I realized the things that were making me sad was because I was carrying around this deep amount of shame for the fact that I was failing in what seemed like every aspect of my life. My relationship was failing. At work, I was failing. I kept watching all of my peers continue to get promotions, take care of their life and their taxes, and I felt like I was in molasses. I just felt stuck.
When's the first time you heard ADHD?
The first time I heard and considered that maybe I had ADHD was in college. I was in my dorm, and a friend of mine came into my room late at night and said, "Hey, can I have some of your Adderall?" And I looked at her confused and said, "Why would I have Adderall? I don't have Adderall." We kind of had this stare down, like we were both figuring out, like, well, because why would I? Yeah. And she was actually studying speech pathology, so I think she knew a little bit more. And she goes, "Because you're ADHD." And I said, "No, I'm not." And then I remember asking peers of mine, do I seem ADHD to you? And most people just laughed at me. Most of my peers just laughed at me like, yeah.
For like the majority of people, they just assumed.
I didn't grow up in a household that was well versed in diagnosis like that. My mom has since then come to me and confessed that she believes that she has ADHD, but it was just normal in my household to always misplace your keys, to always take a long time to exit, to kind of go 0 to 100 really quickly. It wasn't excused behavior, but it was normal.
Can you tell the audience just real quick, like what your cultural background is, Marlena?
I was born in America. My mother was born in America, but her mother was Haitian and her father is Italian American. And my dad is Croatian. It felt like psychology and diagnosis was a very American thing. And it felt like an excuse. And I don't know if it's because my family just had to work so hard. It felt like a Band-Aid on stuff. I carried that with me, I think. I also grew up in Queens, which is technically the most culturally diverse place in the world, like most languages per capita. I was always surrounded by all different kinds of people. It felt like a lot of my friends also had very similar upbringings where getting extra time in school and having medication was weird. It was strange and weak and an excuse.
It sounds like in college you were both, if I'm hearing you correctly, you were both intimately aware that the word existed, the term existed, and that it was a thing, but also had a family culture, a background that said, no, that's an Americanism, that's overblown. Yes, it exists maybe, but it's much smaller than this country thinks it is.
What's more than my upbringing, like cultural upbringing, is my mother was also very holistic. So we grew up with like natural is the way, and anything outside of natural was artificial and not good for you. So the idea of being medicated was always shown in a negative light. It inculcated this like fear of the doctors being the bad guys who were poisoning us and nature being the right way. So that's a weird position to be in. If I'm like, this is my natural self, this is who I am, then any medication would make me not myself.
When did it go from being baloney, brain baloney, to something real?
I felt frozen in not being able to go forward in any capacity. Actually, you, Stephen, recommended that I take this ADCA class. And I resisted it with great force. But I finally took it, and it was an intro to ADHD course, and listening to peers and reading actual research and studies on ADHD, I just felt similarly to when I first got glasses. I had been living my life thinking that I understood what trees looked like, and then I got glasses and I could see every leaf. And it was this moment of, I have been told consistently, everyone deals with that. Everyone's struggling with time management. Everyone's doing it. Put your big girl pants on. I was made to feel as though I was doing a bad job at living, at managing my own time when it wasn't blocked out before me, when I wasn't in a school schedule. And all of a sudden, all of these dots connected. That course made me realize that maybe this isn't what everyone struggles with. And while I didn't want to use it as an excuse, and I still struggle with this. I mean, I feel an imposter syndrome with ADHD, but I'm starting to cope and realize that I do need help.
It is, in my experience, very common for a lot of women who are diagnosed later in life to have to come to terms with not only just accepting the ADHD label, it comes with a lot of stigma, but it's an identity thing. And And for a lot of folks, they grow up just kind of believing and internalizing a lot of the struggles and thinking, it must just be me. The setbacks, the hardships, the characteristics that you felt were impeding your relationships, your career stuff, your academic progress, all of those
and also
things.
because the things that I do are like interrupt people or like talk like most of the presentation, like what I just did, right? Sorry, but it's impulse control. So I'm like, this is my fault. I'm the one that I suck.
Yeah.
I suck.
And it's right. And it's not your fault. It's not you. It's your brain, right? It's your brain wiring. It's part of who you are. And the more we understand ourselves and come to terms with it, and that's why it's so important to pursue diagnosis, even though it's imperfect and the process needs a lot of improvements in terms of how we diagnose, especially adults. Then we have something to wrap our minds around and to say, yeah, this isn't just me. I'm not just a failed person or a flawed person with all these attributes and characteristics. No, this is my executive functioning and brain wiring that is at the core of this. And I now have a roadmap or a path to maybe get some help.
Marley, why get diagnosed now? You've made it this far.
Yeah. I've been asking myself that question as well. There's a few reasons. I think I've subjected my family and friends to this constant seeking, this quest of maybe I have an anxiety disorder. Maybe I have this personality disorder. Maybe I have this mental health issue. It feels like a punctuation to this question I keep asking. But also, I think the first step is acceptance. Even though I know I have ADHD, it'll mean something different talking to a medical professional and saying, I have these traits. I think it's this thing. Is that right? Once I hear it out loud, I'll feel...
You'll feel validated?
Yeah, I don't like the idea that I'm trying to prove something to my family and friends, but I do think that because for so long I did subject them to, I'm trying, I'm doing this, but it'll be a confirmation of this is a real condition and this is something that I've been struggling with for a long time. I will seek the resources of it. I am finally okay, and I've been talking to my doctor about being on medication.
What you said about acceptance, that brings us back to the whole reason we're doing this show. Attention Different is all about this concept of radical acceptance. And what radical acceptance means is understanding ourselves for all of the parts of us, all of the good and the challenging aspects. And I think having the diagnosis could be very confirming and validating for you. This is why my brain functions differently. This is why I'm wired differently.
I think I've also been wrestling with the idea of how to frame it. The other day I had to answer this questionnaire for work, and it asked me if I had a disability. That was really confronting. And I found myself Googling, is ADHD considered a disability? And it is. Yes, there are elements of it that can feel like a superpower, but I think being diagnosed is accepting both things.
I really loved this metaphor you used, Marlena, of the glasses. That metaphor is really strong for me too. And I want the both of you to discuss a little bit. You mentioned that formalizing the diagnosis, it's confirming in a spiritual and emotional way, but it also does confirm something in our government, like in our society. It's a legal thing, right? It affords you access. What are some of those what are the pairs of glasses that Marlena's going to receive after this formal diagnosis?
Getting diagnosis allows you to receive accommodations at work, at school, in other official capacities of your life. And it allows you to pursue different types of treatment, especially medication management of symptoms and other forms of behavioral treatment. So ADHD coaching, cognitive behavioral therapy. If your therapist knows and your doctors and prescribers know, oh, this person has a diagnosis, it can help target and guide that treatment much better. And then the interventions you're doing in your life are more geared towards what you need. Women will come in, especially, and they'll say, for years, I was treated for anxiety. I was treated for depression. I went on an SSRI, antidepressants. I went through this round of therapy, this round of stuff. But the core issue was ADHD all along. And those other things are secondary. If you treat the ADHD, if you get help for those core symptoms, then oftentimes the stuff that's causing you depression and anxiety in your life, that stuff goes down as well. And that sets you up for more success and to feel better.
I was considering and talking to my therapist about taking antidepressants, I was having really hard time sleeping, but I didn't realize that it actually all kind of fell under this umbrella of ADHD. And when I spoke to my doctor and I took Concerta and tried Adderall for the first time, I had all of these radio stations and televisions on, and like 16 of them turned off. And the anxiety went away, and the depression went away, and I felt in my body. And so to have a formal diagnosis and have access to medication, not abuse the medication, feels, I got this taste of what my life was like when I was able to be on medication. And I want to be able to continue to do that because it's made a big difference in work. It's made a big difference in the state of my apartment. Because I think you said that ADHD, it's not about being lazy. It's about not being able to self-motivate and continue to do that.
Russell Barkley says ADHD is a disorder of doing what you know at the right times and place. It's not a disorder of knowing what to do. The term disorder refers to impairment, an impairment of functioning in your life. ADHD is called a disorder because there is impairment. If we're impaired in our life, in our personal lives, in our work life, in multiple domains of our lives, it's pervasive, right? Barkley has shown clearly through evidence that ADHDers, in terms of risk behavior, accidents, death, life expectancy, substance abuse, graduation rates in college, career trajectory, income, all of these things are significantly impaired and reduced for ADHDers. We want to not just focus on all of the problems of ADHD, but what we want to do is look at things in a more balanced context from the point of view of ADHDers ourselves, looking at this through the lens of self-acceptance and coming to terms with what are not just the problems, but what are the strengths and what are the attributes, the abilities, the coping skills, the ways we can work with and manage our own neurodiversity to not only just fit in and be accepted and be given accommodations from society. But how do we put forward a radical new idea of ADHD is an added benefit in a lot of contexts? Neurodiverse folks and ADHDers are on the forefront of pushing innovation. Einstein, Edison, Tesla, like, whatever, right? All of these things, like, there's complex mental health, there's neurodiversity. So just throwing that out there.
The diagnosis process is strenuous, it's challenging, it's emotional, it's hard. There's a whole bunch of stigma. We are not a panel of 3 co-founders who believe that ADHD is on its face a superpower. There's a lot of rhetoric out there that talks about complex mental conditions as superpowers, as superhuman. And I and we completely appreciate and understand the intention, right? It is to buoy us. It is to make you feel better. It is to make you feel more secure and confident in your brain wiring. We are not saying to stop feeling yourself and feel good about yourself, but we are trying to bring a more nuanced approach to complex mental health. There are contexts in which we do better, and there are contexts in which we do not.
ADHD is a consistency disorder. It's not a disorder of inattention, really, and an inability to pay attention. Those are outward displaying external symptoms that we see. Under the surface, under the hood, is the executive functioning. And ADHD is, as we mentioned, it's a disorder of consistency, of directing your attention and applying that consistently enough to get the results that you need. So a lot of times ADHDers are awesome in these hyper-focused spurts, and we produce some amazing stuff in hyper-focused, driven areas, things we're interested in. It's interest-based attention. But then if we're uninterested, if it's boring, if it's tedious, if it takes too long, if we lose that motivation, how do we persist? And that's where ADHD becomes more debilitating sometimes. You might be excited about a project at first at work, and then after you get to a certain point, you're just like, oh, yeah, this is I'm over this. Marlena, I know I sent you some rating scales just for you to complete on your own, and then to take that to your prescriber, whether you go the online diagnosis route or whether you do the in-person route. I know you've been trying and kind of going back and forth on both. But did you see the results that I sent you?
Yeah. I did. It was a little confusing initially, but I know that if you can explain it briefly.
I sent you 2 major ones, the ASRS-5 and the BDEFS. And the ASRS-5 is a ADHD symptom rating scale, and it corresponds with the DSM-5, and it basically has 6 different questions, and if someone scores a 14 or higher, it warrants further screenings. And Marlena scored a 20. That means that it warrants further investigation and further diagnostic interviews to confirm the diagnosis. Then I gave you the Barkley Deficits in Executive Functioning Scale. That measures executive functioning in 5 different domains: self-management of time, self-organization and problem-solving, self-restraint and self-motivation, and self-regulation of emotions. I was surprised because I have never seen anyone score as high on a lot of these as you did.
No.
Now, I don't know, some of this might be a negativity bias because you were self-reporting here, and I know you sometimes are really hard on yourself. And I think maybe you were rating yourself pretty harshly. So we'll put that into context. But you scored in the 99th percentile, the severe range, in almost all of the categories except for 2. And you scored 98% in 1, which was the self-regulation of motion category, and a 96th percentile in the self-motivation category. And just for our listeners to be aware, 99%, I mean, in school, we think that's a great thing. It's like, oh, 99%, that's A+. In the context of this, the higher the percent, the more severe you are in terms of your executive functioning impairments. When I opened up she sent me the scans, I immediately reached out. I'm like, Marlena, you marked in between the lines. It's a Likert scale. So you're supposed to choose a number, but she chose in between, between a 4 and a 5 here, between a 3 and a 4 here. And then on one,
I felt like a 3.5 to me. I think that's limiting.
Yeah. And then on one, you wrote 5 in the margin, all the way on the outside off the charts.
So maybe when I squiggled in between, you should have gone to the lower number.
Right.
You did. Maybe that's true.
That's hilarious.
We can't score that.
It's a supercharged 5. Yeah, it's like a big 5.
Now that I have these test results, what can I do with that?
The BDEFS, you can ask for that from whoever is diagnosing you. It's one of a host of different types of evaluation tools that can be used. And the reason why it's beneficial is because it looks at these areas of executive function, give you more information. So what we can do is then take that, look at each one of those 5 areas, and look at when you receive therapy or ADHD coaching, the interventions you're choosing, you can target those to those executive function areas which you're showing more weakness in, and find some extra tools and supports and strategies to get better. According to the the scales you took, there's a 94% chance that you have ADHD, and now you just need to take the extra step of getting the formal diagnosis to confirm that. But I'm 94%, very confident.
Aaron, that's a high percentage. Is 94% a lot?
Okay.
Is it a lot?
Mm-hmm. That's a lot.
Yeah, as I believe, Marls, I honor you the same way in that the person who diagnosed me first honored me. When my parents asked, so is Steven ADHD? She looked at them and they said, oh, there's ADHD and then there's Steven. He's very ADHD. It's like a key moment.
So the next steps for you, Marlena, will be scheduling a longer diagnostic interview with a qualified mental health professional. That can be a psychiatrist or a psychiatric nurse practitioner or a psychologist or a clinical social worker, someone who can talk to you about the context of what was identified on those rating scales, can confirm that. You differentiate between other potential diagnoses like depression, anxiety, to see if the person is presenting with those things or not. And then you do a diagnostic interview, which is usually about an hour and a half or 2 hours of time. And then that provider, that mental health professional, will also talk to someone in your life, like a third party person or people. So those can be parents or parent who can provide some additional context and talk about the presentation of ADHD over time. That's a critical part of this. And that also is one of those checks and balances on people who are feigning symptoms and malingering. You know, if you talk to someone who has been there with the person for their whole life, you can get a sense of, their trajectory, their childhood. Did the person have struggles in school and early on in their life, and not just something they're experienced in the last year or 6 months or last week?
Is that required? Is that not required in a diagnosis?
It is not necessarily required. It's a recommendation. It's a guideline.
I feel as though my family is coming around to accepting that I have ADHD. However, it does make me a little nervous that they might be reached out to. And I'm just wondering how to have these kind of conversations with my family. I'm just wondering if you have any advice on how I can open up this dialogue.
Qualified, competent mental health professional is going to take whatever they say within, with a grain of salt. Even if they come across and think the whole industry is a bunch of quacks and they, don't confirm a lot of the stuff that you're saying, I think they'll be able to parse that out and differentiate and see.
So my mom recently, in the last few years, has come around to ADHD being a real thing. Words like maybe I have it and maybe it was still kind of in this, maybe you're onto something. I might have ADHD, while still kind of keeping an arm's length, which felt huge to me. I mean, it felt like confetti cannons of acceptance. I am curious how someone like my father would answer that. It's almost like I want to ask for him or her to talk to 4 people. I know my sister Sarah will have a very neutral and an honest opinion. Plus, she's observed me her whole life spinning in circles. I think my father will have a very meh, yeah, I guess, I don't know. And I'm just, yeah, I guess that's for me. I want to see if they ask the question, but then also have the freedom to request it.
We're going to try our best to dive headfirst into the top priority challenges for adults with ADHD right out of the gate. You've either just got your diagnosis or you're about to be diagnosed. We are talking directly to you. It doesn't mean that we're not including the rest of the people out there who already have a diagnosis or are looking for more help and guidance and tips on adulting with ADHD. So we're really grateful that you're here. We hope you stick around and stay with us because we're going to take this bit by bit. We're going to take this piecemeal and really invite you guys into what we believe is one of the most healthy ways to deal with this condition as an adult, right? And we're going to bring it. We're going to bring it all.
Thanks for watching. Don't forget, like, follow, subscribe. Stay tuned. Come back for more. See you soon.